How's it going, everyone? As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. This is PSReady, my channel all about PlayStation. I hope you had a great weekend playing a ton of video games. I started a playthrough of Dying Light 1 around a month ago, and that game still holds up. It was so ahead of its time, as proven by the fact that it's 10 years old, and it feels like a newer, modern, open-world game still to this day. The reason I wanted to go back and play it is because I never played the following DLC, and it's really hard, so you need a full-level character to go into it. So I finished the story, started the following, and I can't believe it took me this long to play it. It's kind of like a Mad Max version of Days Gone, honestly, because in Days Gone, you're tied to the motorbike throughout the entire game, but in this, you're tied to a Doom buggy, which you can upgrade, repair, customize, do whatever you want with, and there's an entire skill tree just for the Doom buggy, which is awesome. The Dying Light Enhanced Edition that comes with the following is always like $6 or $7 on PSN, so don't overpay for it, but if you're looking for a great zombie game to play during October, I mean, this is just an excellent example and maybe one of the best of all time. Anyway, in today's video, we have 3 topics to cover, starting out with some new info on the PlayStation 6, including the release date and how it's going to fit into the pricing structure compared to the next generation Xbox. After that, we get to pat ourselves on the back because it's been revealed that we're the ones keeping Sony's first-party single-player studios alive. And finally, I also played a ton of Battlefield 6 this weekend, and it's selling best on PS5, so I'll tell you my brief thoughts on the game so far. Anyway, let's jump into the first news story here because it's all about the PlayStation 6. So the PS6 has been in the news a lot lately, mainly because Mark Cerny directly referenced it in that video he put out with AMD. It was 8 minutes. They talked about Project Amethyst, they talked about Radiance cores, they talked about neural arrays. I did my best to break it down, but he also said we're getting a new machine in the next few years, so there's your direct confirmation of the PlayStation 6 from Sony. So we can rest easy knowing that it is officially going to happen. Kepler, who's a pretty reliable leaker in the PlayStation world, had some leaks himself. And then finally, Tom from Moore's Law is Dead most recently put out some leaks that basically nail down the release timing and the price range of the console. So everything you'd want to know about the PlayStation 6 has either been revealed by Sony or leakers who have ironclad track records. So I feel pretty good reporting on this stuff. Also, Tom's a great guy, so you should check out his channel. But anyway, the first thing that was revealed is the release window. It's not going to surprise anyone because it's 2027. We've been talking about this for a long time being the release window. It just lines up perfectly since the PS5 came out in 2020, I want to say, either 2020 or 2021. Regardless, PS4, PS3, they all had 7 to 8 year life cycles, so they're just going to keep going down the life cycle path they've always gone down, which is 7 or 8 years. Looking back to the PlayStation 4, I remember when the rumors started with the PlayStation 5, everyone was like, we don't need a new console just yet, and then there was those 2 years in between where games started to advance a little bit more and games started to run and look worse on the PlayStation 4, and then by the time the PS5 came out, everyone was on board and it had the biggest launch of any PlayStation console in history. I don't know if that's how it happened during the PS2 to PS3 transition because I was in high school or middle school back then. I was pretty young and I wasn't tuned in with online sources like IGN or anything, but I know I was really excited when I saw the leaks and announcements of the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, because back then a new generation meant a new generation and not like a pro console with a new name, which is sadly what these things have kind of become. But as games get harder and harder to run, it is good to have the extra overhead that comes with new machines, so I'm not really complaining. The weird thing is there's a big difference with the PS5 compared to the PS4 and PS3, and that of course is that the PS5 is an extremely good console. It feels like it still runs really well, just as well as it did back when it came out. I know there's less games coming out now that run at 60 FPS because, you know, a lot of the ones that did were cross-generational, but outside of a few Unreal Engine 5 outliers, the vast majority of games released on the PS5 look and run absolutely fine. The interface still looks fresh and modern. I haven't gotten sick of it yet like I did with the PS4's interface. It works great as a TV entertainment center with all the streaming apps. I just don't know where there is to go in terms of making the PS6 feel next gen, and it seems like that was kind of the plan because, as has been made clear by Sony a lot during this generation, the plan isn't to completely abandon the PS5 immediately. The plan is to grow the floor, the overall footprint of the PlayStation ecosystem. So they're probably accounting for the millions or so of people who are still going to hold out and hang on to the PS4 even when the PlayStation 6 is coming out. I doubt we'll see PS4 releases once the PS6 is out because there will be a big enough footprint in the PS5 era where they can just move everything up. So you'll see PS5 and PS6 games coming out at the same time for as long as they can feasibly keep that up. But they want to make sure they just have the biggest number of PlayStation gamers out there possible. And the best way to do that is to keep the PS5 around. And the best thing is they made a good console that could actually last that long. I don't think I personally could still play on the PlayStation 4. I love it. It's probably the best overall, just like objectively speaking, console Sony's ever made, from games library to overall hardware and everything else. Even the controller was like amazing, and the DualSense is just a revision of the DualShock 4, but you hit a certain point where it's just too old, and I think the PS4 is at least a few years past that. The PS5 feels like you could get a solid 10 years out of it, and when you're talking about the PS5 Pro, I mean, you could get even longer. That console has not been sort of pushed to its limits yet by any metric. I'm not really counting Unreal Engine 5 games as pushing it to its limits because, as we've seen over and over again, it's not an engine problem. There are plenty of Unreal Engine 5 games that look and run amazing, Tokyo Extreme Racer being a more recent one. I can play that just fine on my Steam Deck, so I don't foresee it having any issues on the PlayStation 5. It's a developer problem. They're rushing out their games, they're saving the optimization till the end stage, and they're paying the price for it. So yes, it is harder to run than other engines, but you get dividends that are positive, like better looking games that look more realistic. So I don't think the PS5 has been pushed anywhere close to its limit, let alone the PlayStation 5 Pro. So 2027 makes sense, especially because Xbox is releasing their next generation machine, and that one's going to be a lot different than the PlayStation 6. The PS6, by everything we've heard, is going to be just a regular old console, which I think is good. You want that convenience, that plug and play factor that you get with a console, whereas the Xbox is going to be a desktop PC running an app layer, kind of like SteamOS. If you've never seen how a Steam Deck works, it runs Linux, but it has a game overlay, so it like works like a console. It's fully controller navigatable. You can launch your apps, you can launch your games, you can buy games, you can interact with your friends, but if you want the desktop mode, it's there. That looks like what the Xbox is doing, but I've been playing around with the preview mode of Xbox full screen experience, and they have a ton of work in that department, so that's going to be a huge adjustment for people who have only interacted with Xbox through the console. Like, it has become more PC-like through Desktop Edge and other apps, and you can use a mouse and keyboard with it, but Windows is a completely different beast. It has never been made for gaming. Gaming has never been the true focus of Windows, so I think that's going to be a huge adjustment for people, and I don't know how it's going to pay off. So for Sony, I'd rather them stick with what they know and keep refining and perfecting the actual console that we've gotten used to over 5 generations up until now. But that brings us to price. So performance-wise, the PS6 is going to be less performant than the Xbox console, but the Xbox console, again, is going to be a desktop PC. So there's a lot of extra stuff that needs to run in the background when you're using Windows that you don't have to account for when you're just making a console. The console's only goal is to be able to play games. When you make a desktop PC, it has to do other things, like have a desktop and a web browser and apps and everything else, and have the taskbar running and have all these things and processes running in the background. So to get the same level of performance out of the Xbox, it probably needs a better chip than what you're going to see in the PS6. And knowing that Microsoft is partnering up with companies like Asus, probably Lenovo, probably Alienware, and everyone else, they don't have the same constraint to make their console the absolute dirt cheap as possible. So that one's going to be more expensive for that extra performance. Sony is probably going to do their best to stay in that cost prohibitive tier where it's going to stay $500 or $600, where you're going to get the entry level people and give them great performance for a great price. I think, again, that's the smartest thing to do, because even though the Switch 2 is expensive compared to the original Switch, which also got a price increase, if you're playing in the console realm, you got to sell for console prices. That's the market they're trying to carve out. And with Nintendo making, games that skew younger, they don't actually, because Nintendo's entire audience is basically made up of people my age, which is crazy. They're not bringing in young people, but the olds like me are still buying kid games. It's crazy, but they're going for different audiences, and the best way to do that is to keep it as cheap as possible and maximize the potential performance you can get out of those machines. So yes, on paper, it's going to be less powerful, but the PS5 on paper is less powerful than the Series X. And how many games have come out this generation that look and run better on the PS5 than Series X? But even in that case, it's such a minor difference that the average person wouldn't even notice anyway. So I think that's fine as well. So to wrap this up, the timing's weird, of course, like the PS5 hasn't really reached its full potential, but the silver lining there is there's no reason to upgrade until you feel like you should upgrade. If you feel like you have more horsepower to get out of your PlayStation 5 that you spent over $500 on or more, if you got the PS5 Pro, just do it. A lot of people did it this generation and Sony rewarded them with cross-generational games. If you're the bleeding edge tech kind of person, you already knew you were going to buy it anyway. So Sony's goal here is to keep the PS ecosystem big. It's fine. Play on the console you want to play on and buy the games on the console you want to play them on. And if you do upgrade to the PlayStation 6, I guarantee there will be at most a $10 upgrade you have to worry about, which isn't the end of the world. But anyway, both camps are important to Sony, which brings us to the second news story here, which is some new data we're getting from Matt Piscatella over at Circana, which isn't really surprising, but is worth talking about nonetheless. So the big data point that came out is over 60% of people do not buy more than 2 games a year. So you know what kind of person I'm talking about. The person who buys either FIFA, Madden, NCAA football, and Call of Duty. Those are their 2 big purchases every year. They play those throughout the year. They interact with Warzone. They interact with all the new seasons. They interact with everything you can do in a sports game, and they are totally content to just buy those 2 games and then spend the rest of their time playing free-to-play games like Warzone, like Genshin Impact, like Fortnite, like I don't know, any other free-to-play game you can come up with, and then Sony makes money off of them through microtransactions, and that's where most of the money is because that's where most of the gamers are. And then you can kind of see why Sony has put so much effort into making one live service game that absolutely takes off, because then they're getting 100% of the revenue and not just 30% of every microtransaction purchase on their console. And then digging into the data, only 14% of players buy multiple games every single month. So, you know, when you look at that data, it's easy to extrapolate it out to say we, the hardcore gamers who are buying first party games, who are buying single player stuff throughout the year, like Silent Hill F, Metal Gear Solid Delta, Oblivion Remastered, all these big games that come and go throughout the year, 14% of the total population of gamers on PlayStation devices and Xboxes, I guess, and Nintendo Switches are buying multiple games within a month. And I don't know if it's bad to admit this, but I definitely buy multiple games in a month if I'm interested in multiple games in a month. Like I bought Silent Hill F, I bought Dying Light the Beast, and if I didn't get a review key for Chronos the New Dawn, I definitely would have bought Chronos the New Dawn right when it came out, because there's just a lot of games coming out that I'm interested in. Now, I don't know if this is bad, but I definitely fall into that camp. I buy multiple games in a month if there are games that are interesting to me within a month. Like I bought Battlefield 6, I bought Silent Hill F, I bought Dying Light the Beast, and I would have bought Chronos the New Dawn if I didn't get a review key for it. Even if I wasn't going to play them all immediately, I did play most of them all immediately, thankfully, but it's just nice to have them on my shelf ready to go. There are games that I'll sit back and wait for a sale on or wait for some patches on, like Oblivion Remastered is a great example. I didn't buy that because I saw how it ran and I figured, hey, if I don't have time to play this right now and I don't know if they're going to fix it, based on the track record of Unreal Engine 5 devs, like specifically Virtuous, who's notorious for never going back and fixing their games, why would I give them full price right now? But if they're making great games like Chronos, like Battlefield 6, like Silent Hill F, like Dying Light the Beast, I may as well just buy it for full price to support the developer because I know I'm eventually going to play that game. And it's weird because I know a lot of people who play games but don't buy multiple games within a month. There's like a happy middle ground between 2 games a year and buying games every single month, and it's literally only buying games you're interested in. My best friend, he bought Hollow Knight Silksong. I'm pretty sure other than that, the only game he bought new this entire year would be like Final Fantasy Tactics Remake The Ivalice Chronicles or something like that. He specifically waits for games he's interested in, and if they do fall within the same month, he'll pick them both up, but if they don't, he'll have a big gap in between those games, and he doesn't really try to branch out and try new things. But to round it out, yeah, we're the ones keeping the first party studios alive, because while Sony would love for all of them to be making big successful multiplayer games, Santa Monica Studios working on God of War, Naughty Dog's working on Intergalactic, they canceled their multiplayer game, Sucker Punch just put out Ghost of Yotei, Kojima Productions just put out Death Stranding 2. None of those are live service multiplayer games, so they're making games for an audience that is 14% of their potential customers if this data is to be believed to not include mobile games and everything like that. So that's why it's so cutthroat in the world of first party gaming or single player gaming, where you need every game to be successful. And, you know, most of them lately are not, because it seems like these companies don't really want to listen to their audience and just tell them what to play, which sucks, but, you know, it'll course correct, right? 14% of people doesn't seem like a big number until you account for the total population, which is massive, right? Like, there's a lot of people playing games. So 14% is just a huge raw number of people that are obviously worth supporting, because we're getting single player games like Wolverine, Mafia, The Old Country, and everything else all the time. But speaking of games that are strong contenders for being one of people's 2 purchases of the year, let's talk about Battlefield 6. So this is a big comeback for Battlefield. I played Battlefield 3 and 4 back in the day. Battlefield 4 was one of the first games I bought on the PlayStation 4. It launched really rough, but by the time I picked it up, it had all of its big issues ironed out, and things like Levolution and everything were really cool. Battlefield 1 was excellent, and then they started their decline with Battlefield 5, which was mediocre, I would say, at best. And then, of course, Battlefield 2042, which was a huge disaster. Then they regrouped, they got all their EA studios working on Battlefield 6 to bring it back to the Battlefield 3 basis, and I think largely it is a success. I played a little bit of the campaign so far. I think it's not getting a great rap, honestly. Like, yeah, it doesn't live up to the bombastic moments of a Call of Duty campaign, but it does a decent job teaching you the different mechanics of the multiplayer, and the story and characters are pretty well written. And like, realistically, who is buying a Battlefield game for the campaign? I feel like 99% of people playing this just jumped right into the multiplayer, and they know, because when you beat the Battlefield campaign, it tells you to uninstall it. Like, you could just uninstall it when you're done with it, get some space back on your SSD. So they know where their bread is buttered, and it is in the multiplayer. So I'd rather them put as many resources as possible on the multiplayer. That's just being smart businessmen. And speaking of the multiplayer, I've been having a great time with it, despite the fact that I absolutely suck ass at this game. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I think I figured it out. I'll tell you in a sec. But as someone who plays a lot of hardcore first-person shooters relentlessly, like Stalker, like Escape from Tarkov, like, you know, Hunt Showdown 1896 is one of the most hardcore shooters out there, I'm terrible at Battlefield. And I think I figured it out. In Hunt Showdown, you move left and right when you're aiming at someone so that they can't train their aim on you, because it has to have pinpoint accuracy. I've been doing that in Battlefield, and then someone told me that in Battlefield, you get a massive accuracy increase by standing still, and a massive accuracy debuff by moving left and right when you're shooting. So that's why I think when I'm aiming right at a guy, I have the crosshair right over him, and I just watch my bullets go in a halo around him, and then he kills me in 2 seconds. I think it's because they're standing still and I'm moving. So basically right now, I lose every gunfight I get into, but I'm like itching to get back to it, and that's what tells me it's a good game, and it's more of a skill issue than the game problem. So that's good overall. I've had a lot of fun on a bunch of the maps. This mode Breakthrough is the one that my buddies and I have been playing the most, where it's like a quicker paced version of Conquest, where the map is like push-pull, where, you know, one side is attacking and trying to capture all the different points, and one side is defending and you're trying to push back the defenders. I've been having a ton of fun with that. Some of the maps are better for it than others, like the New York City map is just chaos, and you really feel like it's up to luck who wins or loses in that. But for the most part, I think the map design is excellent. The weapons feel really good. The sound is amazing. I like that it's grounded and doesn't have movie skins. Like when I'm recording this video, it doesn't have movie skins. We could see them go back on it. They're doing the classic thing too, where they don't launch with a battle pass. They don't launch with the big shop where you can buy all the skins. So I'm reserving judgment on that stuff until it's actually out. But the core game that I'm actually playing is a ton of fun. And on day one, launch day, it worked really well. There was a server queue early in the morning, but later on at night when I got on with my friends, didn't have to deal with any of that. I've encountered 0 bugs or issues or frame rate drops. This is an immaculately crafted, well optimized game. It really seems like they had a checklist of everything to make a quality game and checked it off. I wish they would do that for every game, but you know, when they have a game that can sell as many copies as Battlefield does, I understand why they're putting so much effort into it versus other stuff like maybe Dead Space. But anyway, guys, that's all I have for you in today's video. As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, and shape on.